everybody. This is Farm Fresh from Thunder Ridge Homestead. I don't do these talking head videos very often because there's a lot more interesting things to see on a homestead than me. But today I wanted to take a minute to kind of let you know a little bit about me and my family and one of the things that as a family we have to deal with. And one of those things is being celiac. Now, what celiac is, it's very confusing to a lot of people. You hear the terms being gluten-free a lot, and a lot of people talk about benefits of being gluten-free to your diet and your lifestyle and everything else. But I don't think very many people know really what that means, and they don't quite understand what it's like to be truly celiac. Celiac Speru is a genetic disorder. It's an autoimmune condition, they say. It is inherited characteristic, and what it is certain people, like me myself, have a genetic lack of an enzyme in our body. We just don't produce the enzyme. And that enzyme is what is required to break down gluten. And what gluten is it is a protein that is within grains of wheat, barley, and rye predominantly. It can be found in other things to a lesser degree. There is such a thing as corn gluten, but it's not the same as the wheat, barley, and rye gluten. By lacking this enzyme, our bodies cannot process that protein within the grain. And what happens is, in your digestive tract, in a normal digestive tract, when you eat food, your saliva enzymes start to break down the food and digest it. Then it goes down into your stomach. You have stomach fluids that break down the food further and digest it, and then it starts traveling through the small intestine. And as it travels through the small intestine, the nutrients are absorbed. And someone like myself that's celiac, the digestive enzymes in our mouth start to work, the digestive enzymes in our stomach start to work, but since that protein in the gluten in the wheat or barley or rye has not been broken down, it doesn't digest. And inside of your small intestines you have small little hairs, for lack of a better term, and they're called cilia, and they kind of move like in a little wave motion like that, and it helps the food to progress down through your digestive tract. When the protein does not digest in a celiac person, it pastes the little hairs down flat inside of your intestine, and eventually it destroys the little hairs, and it'll even inflame the intestines, and it causes all kinds of extra mucus and extra problems within the intestinal wall, which in return, you don't digest your food properly, you don't get any advantages from like nutrients like minerals in particular, and vitamins and things that are in your food, and it causes major problems. It's kind of, it seems like it's just suddenly popped up. It hasn't suddenly popped up. This has been an ongoing thing, but for many, many years it was very difficult to diagnose. In the past, when they wanted to diagnose someone as being celiac, they had to actually take a sample of stomach tissue and they biopsied it, and then they would grow it in a lab and do tests on it, and they could determine at that point that you did not produce the enzyme. Science has made major advancements in many ways. Now, to be diagnosed as being celiac, it's a blood test, and so a lot of doctors are performing the blood test. It's important to note that you have to currently be eating wheat and other gluten products at the time of the blood test, or the blood test will not work. So that's a very important thing about diagnosing being celiac as opposed to, you know, another condition. In my family, my grandmother on my mom's side was probably celiac, although back then they'd never diagnosed her or had any idea what it was. Because of her condition, she had bleeding ulcers most of her life. That was her main symptom, and it's caused by the irritation in her digestive tract and, you know, all kinds of major issues she had. But she just had ulcers and stomach problems and her whole life. I mean, as long as she could remember, she always had some kind of stomach issue going on. My mom, who was also an undiagnosed celiac, at least that's what I'm pretty sure of, she had extreme acid reflux issues to the point that it eventually caused enough irritation to her esophagus that she actually developed esophageal cancer from the acid reflux, and she ended up dying from her esophageal cancer. And I really believe that if they had known about such a thing as being celiac, and maybe she had been diagnosed, things would have been different. When it gets a little closer to home, I have 3 children, and my middle daughter was having, she's always had like allergy issues and been unthrifty and just not gained weight and could eat, you know, like a horse and never gain any weight, and you know, just kind of always, anytime anybody got the flu, she got it. You know, it was just one of those things. And like I said, seasonal allergies were terrible with her. When she was a kid, we always had to struggle with it. They did allergy testing on her when she was a child, but they never really tested her for food allergies. They just tested her for like the seasonal type things. And so life goes on. As a 20-something, she started having severe issues with her gallbladder. And she went into a doctor and got diagnosed. And he was, fortunately, we had a good doctor. They actually did a stomach biopsy on her and found out, you know, through a lot of testing, that she indeed is celiac. When it goes a step further, we find out that not only is she celiac, but my middle daughter is also what is called wheat allergic. The difference between being celiac and being wheat allergic is how it manifests. The celiac, like I said, digestive issues, trouble with your, you know, gallbladder, trouble with your small intestine, trouble with your esophagus, trouble with your stomach. A lot of times they have stomach cramps, they have diarrhea, they have constipation. That's just par for the course in a celiac. Someone who's wheat allergic actually has problems with breathing issues, allergy type issues like eyes watering, nose watering, and so forth. And my daughter, as she got off of the wheat and got off of the gluten, when she is reintroduced to either of those things, she is so allergic that she actually experiences anaphylaxis, like a lot of people do. You know, you hear about people that go anaphylactic, which means your throat swells, your chest swells, your tongue swells, your face swells, your intestines swell, you cannot breathe, and to the point that she has to carry an EpiPen. Okay, and even a crumb, a tiny crumb, is enough to set her into a point where she is in anaphylactic shock. It's a life-threatening emergency with her. She has to use an EpiPen. She has to go to the emergency room. Very, very serious condition. Because she is so allergic and so severe as far as her celiac and her wheat allergy is concerned, she has had to have her gallbladder removed. She has had problems with her biliary system and her gallbladder fluids and things like that, where it goes through your liver, where it would normally go into the gallbladder and then it goes into your intestines. She's had to have liver surgery. She's had major, major stuff happen, and it's all due to the damage done by being undiagnosed as a celiac for 20 odd years and having as much condition as she did. Evidently, if you start out eating a little bit of poison, you can build up enough of immunity that it doesn't kill you. It does terrible damage to you, but it doesn't kill you. That's why as a child she could eat bread, she could eat wheat, she could eat things, and it didn't kill her, but it just aggravated her whole system, so to the point it just kind of kept it in that aggravated, agitated state constantly. Now that she's off of the wheat, off of the gluten, her allergy, most of her seasonal allergies are gone. She feels much better for the most part, but you know, she's still having to deal with the damage issues. When we decided, we found out that she was celiac, it has to come from somewhere, and so I started checking me, and come to find out I too am celiac. My only indication of the condition for me was I had chronic acid reflux. They had me on all kinds of medication. I also had seasonal allergies, not to the degree that my daughter does, but I did have them. When I quit eating gluten, quit eating wheat, my allergy symptoms have almost gone completely away. I had quite severe asthma. My asthma symptoms have almost completely gone away. They're still there a little bit, but nothing like they used to be. I could pretty much function. My acid reflux completely gone, and it's been a huge deal. My daughter has a child now, my grandson. You've seen him in some of the videos. He also is celiac. My grandson and I so far have not shown that we have the wheat allergy to the extent that my daughter has, thank goodness. But if either he or I get that little crumb of wheat or that little, extra breadcrumb cross-contamination stuff going on, both of us react like we have food poisoning. We have violent diarrhea, we have stomach cramps, we throw up. I mean, it's just exactly like food poisoning would be in anybody else. And it'll take a week or more for us to feel better. That is celiac. That's what my family deals with, and that is why we eat gluten-free. There is no pill I can take. There is no, special type of wheat like ancient wheats or ancient grains that we can use, because we just simply lack the enzyme. There are people out there that have what they call gluten sensitivity. These people, the gluten affects the way they eat, it affects their way they feel, etc. But if they eat gluten, it's not food poisoning. Okay? If they eat gluten, they may, be gassy or have a little bit of intestinal problems. Or I know one woman that has gluten sensitivity that she's also diabetic, and it affects her sugar levels and things. So there is another thing called gluten sensitivity. They're very polarly different. We cannot choose to eat gluten or not eat gluten. By being celiac, it is a way of life for us. It has to be a way of life. The reason I'm bringing all this up is because I am going to try to do a new thing on this channel occasionally, and that is going to be a gluten-free food review. When we first were diagnosed as being celiac, we had no clue. There are more and more people in the world that are getting that blood test, and they are finding out that they're celiac, and their doctor is telling them to eat gluten-free, and they have no idea. Fortunately, the whole food world has kind of woken up to gluten-free foods, which has been a blessing for those of us that are celiac, because back in the day, it's like everything had to be made from scratch. Some of the ingredients were hard to find, and like I said, fortunately, we weren't diagnosed until after this whole awakening has happened. So there are a lot of gluten-free products on the market right now for us. The problem is the quality of the gluten-free products varies extreme and widely. Having been someone that ate normal food, and having been a homesteader and pretty much just a foodie in general before I became celiac, I know what food's supposed to taste like. I know what good bread tastes like. I used to make good bread. I used to be a wonderful baker. Since being gluten-free, I've noticed if I even handle a gluten-free flour, even with a dust mask, breathing gloves, the whole 9 yards, I end up with like strep throat symptoms, because I react to the gluten, just even to make bread. So it's been kind of hard for me, being a baker and doing other things, to have to completely give that up, because I can't use regular flour. Anything we cook has to be fixed gluten-free. My daughter, because she's so extreme, pretty much keeps a gluten-free house. There's not a single thing in her house that contains gluten. Whenever we have any family gatherings or anything like that, we have to be real careful, especially Christmas time, Thanksgiving, and so forth. There's certain gluten-free items. You cannot dip with a spoon into some gravy or something that has gluten and then touch or put the spoon into something that does not have gluten, because if my daughter eats it, it's an emergency room visit. So we have to be extremely careful and extremely clean. It has helped tremendously because of being a homesteader. I cook my own food, and I know about safety procedures and safety processes as far as like when I'm canning and stuff. I know what it means to stay clean. I know what it means to keep, everything wiped down, bacterial loads and everything. And if you just carry that to another degree or another area, another way, you can do the same thing for being gluten-free. You know how to keep the gluten cross-contamination gone, right? You understand that. Because I was a cook before, and my daughter is also a cook, and we're scratch cookers, we understand what goes into the making of a food. So we understand that things that most people wouldn't consider might have a little bit of flour or a little bit of wheat-based something in it as a thickener. We are more aware of that than, say, someone who doesn't cook or doesn't know. For example, a canned soup, tomato soup, or canned vegetable soup. Who would think that there would be wheat in that, right? But because we cook, we know that they often use, wheat or flour or things like that as a thickener for the sauces. And so because we're aware of that, we know. We have to read every can, every label constantly. And then when you buy things, gluten-free foods are expensive. So many times, you have to spend so much more. You can typically, in our part of the country right now, go to the grocery store and get a good premium loaf of bread, regular wheat bread, pound and a half loaf, $2. Wonderful. If you're gluten-free, you go and you purchase a loaf of bread, and it's a 1-pound loaf. It's in the freezer section, and we typically pay $6 to $8 or even more dollars for one 1-pound loaf of bread. It really changes how you do things. It really changes how you eat. We eat a lot more rice. We eat a lot more potatoes, for example, because we can't eat the bread. You can't make a sandwich. You can't make toast. You just have to be so much more aware of it all. But it's even more disappointing when you're gluten-free, you have no choice, and you go to the grocery store and you spend $6 for a box of cookies, and you bring them home and you open them up and you're so excited because you get a cookie, and they taste like horrible. I mean, you cannot even eat them. They are either so hard you can't bite through them, they're so crumbly they fall apart, they taste terrible. And to the point that sometimes I've even tried to feed it to the dog and the dog won't eat it. Okay? Ridiculous. But now you've put out that much money out of your grocery budget and you end up with nothing you can eat. Even worse, when you buy a loaf of gluten-free bread at the store and you get a loaf of bread, you open it up to make a sandwich, and the bread is so crumbly it will not hold up long enough to have a sandwich out of it, or you can't even get a piece of bread out of the bag because it's just fallen apart. And yet you've paid, a premium price for that piece of bread, and you're still don't have any food. It's very, very upsetting. So one thing I'm going to try to do to help people that are interested is I'm going to try to do some gluten-free food reviews. I'm going to take you through simple things like breads, cookies. When I buy something, I'm going to just try to be as honest as I can. I'm going to tell you what I think of the flavor. I'm going to tell you what my daughter thinks of the flavor. And I'm going to tell you what my grandson thinks of the flavor, if it's possible. Some things are really good. they've gotten to the point now where there are some things that are really good. There are some things that are really, really bad. Brand does matter. An example is right now on the market there are several brands of gluten-free donuts, okay, and they are gluten-free. Some of the donuts are inedible. One brand of donut tastes exactly like a normal donut. And I'm going to try to empower you by doing some of these food reviews to save your money. If we buy the things that are good and don't buy the things that are bad, maybe, just maybe, they'll keep working on them till they get them better. It's not fair that we should spend a premium price and not have food to eat out of it. Anyway, I just wanted to take this time to tell you what I'm planning on doing in the future, why I'm planning on doing it, and if there's anything I can do to anybody out there that they have questions. I'm not a doctor. I can't tell you a lot of that stuff, but maybe I can help you a little bit, aim you in the right direction, and tell you questions to ask your doctor, for example. If you are concerned and think that you may possibly have issues with gluten, don't stop eating it, but go talk to your doctor. They can make a blood test and they can diagnose you one way or the other. If you're diagnosed as being celiac, then you're at least informed and you can go forward, and you should go forward, because by eating what we cannot process, we actually do physical damage to our bodies in a lot of ways. And the quicker you can get away from that, the better. If you just have sensitivity, it's good to find that out too, because then you can be aware. Maybe you'll get your blood test back and it has no problems. That's fine. If you have that problem, you can just figure out, well, it's something else that's bothering me. Maybe I'm allergic to high fructose corn syrup, or maybe I'm allergic to eggs, or maybe I'm not chewing my food well enough. You know, there's a lot of things it can be that can cause digestive problems and issues. But be aware and be warned and be informed. And that's what I'm going to try to do to help you guys out. So I hope you can follow along with me, and I hope this makes a difference for somebody's life. Thanks for watching.